Do you want to see something wild? It is late on a Friday night, pajama pants, but the winter storm Jerry is outside, so we're finally getting snow. So now we gotta get ready for tomorrow. So but check this out. And it looks just like a snowboard, I know. But have you ever seen something like this? This is an e-snowboard, and I won't lie to you. When I get a lot of emails from a lot of random companies, and a lot of them are they just got crap they want me to look at. Sometimes there's some good stuff on there. But when I saw the email that said, hey, would you like to check out our electric snowboard? I was like, wow, that's a weird typo I've never seen before. But you can't just read something like that and not click it. So of course I clicked the link, and wow, at least on the picture at first, it looked like a real snowboard that somebody just hogged a hole in the back of and plopped down a giant paddle tire. And I was like, I of course want to see that. And this was a while ago. We haven't had like hardly any snow all year. They sent it to me. It just got here yesterday. It took a while to get here. It got here like yesterday or the day before. No snow at all. Snowstorm Jerry's here, and there's a ton of snow outside right now. So tomorrow we are finally going to be able to hopefully try this thing out. I have not done anything with this. I have to go find my old board in the back. I used to snowboard quite a bit when I was younger. I don't do it quite as often anymore, but I have an old board back there that I'm gonna go see if I can get the bitings off of, put them on here. I gotta go find my old boots and coat, and I'm really excited for this. Probably more excited than I should be, but this looks so much fun, if it works, that is. But we're gonna find out, because this thing is just sick. It is extremely heavy though. Like I said, I haven't tried this thing. I haven't even turned it on yet. Here's the battery for it. That's a chonker. The battery's quite heavy. The board is, I mean, we'll have to get on a scale with this board and see how heavy it is, but it's hefty. And the center of gravity is like here. The whole board is completely lopsided when it comes to weight. I don't know how that's gonna work riding this thing. I don't even know how a board would work with a wheel in it riding it. This is insane, because it's not like a weird snowboard with like grooves on the bottom of it. This is a legit snowboard. It has edges on it. It's pre-waxed. It's smooth. It feels, I mean, it feels like a quality board. The whole build quality of this thing actually feels pretty impressive. And the controller for it is this wireless controller. We'll plug it in and see how it works. But I guess the idea is you put this monster battery in your backpack. You connect it to the controller here with this cable, and then supposedly it makes you go vroom vroom on the snow. I have the instruction manual right here. It's a Cyrusher. Cyrusher? I think it's Cyrusher Ripple. Going through this thing, let's see how fast this bad boy can go. Or at least how fast they say it can go. Sport mode, 0 to 50 kilometers an hour, so like 30, 31 miles an hour. Oh, here we go. Here's some specs. Board, camber, 156 centimeters, top speed, 50 kilometers an hour, range, 15 to 20 kilometers an hour, maximum power, 3,000 watts. Battery is 635 watt hour behemoth. The wheel's 11 inches. The controller is a Ripple V1. The max climb, so I guess that's grade it can go up, is 20%, it says. It's got regenerative braking. That's kind of impressive. Charge time, 2.5 hours. Max load, 200 pounds. Okay, the max load for this thing is 200 pounds. I am not 200 pounds. I am like 220, so I'm gonna have to pay the fat boy tax, so I'm sure we'll not get 50 kilometers an hour. We'll find out how fast we can go. It says the board weighs 50 kg, or 15 kg. If it weighed 50 kg, that'd be a little much, but 15 kg. And I believe it. But let's go, I'm gonna go find my old board. It's somewhere back there. It's quite beat up and used. It's very old. Oh, it's so dusty. And this is my Burton Bullet. It's a classic. And these are the bindings that we got to try to remove. They are quite rusty at this point. Like I said, these have been on here for, I would say, easily 10 years. I haven't used this board in quite a while because you can see it's pretty beat up. The front of it took quite a few rails in its life, and it's kind of just delaminating. But like I said, I've had it forever, so I couldn't just chuck it. Worked good. Let's plug this thing in and see if it actually works. That'd be very disappointing. Is it on? Ooh, it scared me. It scared me, I'm not gonna lie. Got a little freaked out there, but let's go. It feels, look at the board jump. It feels pretty torquey. Well, it all seems to be working. I might have to take it out tonight. It's like it's dark out, but I might just have to take it for a quick cruise just so I can familiarize myself before we go riding tomorrow. The Cyrusher Ripple. Let's discuss what this thing actually is. Since filming that intro, it's been about a week or so, and I've used this board in a few different snow conditions with mixed results. I don't know if you can tell in that intro video, I was pretty excited about trying this thing out. It had just shown up like a day or two before making that intro. I'd only taken it out of the box to make sure the battery was charged. When we were looking at it in the intro, it was my first time really giving this thing a once over, and I really liked what I saw. As someone who grew up snowboarding mostly on terrain parks in my younger years, this just seemed pretty awesome. I had like this preconceived idea or expectation for what I thought this was before riding it. My assumption or my hope was that it would be like going out to the slopes without actually having to go out to the slopes. You could just go out in your neighborhood and you could rip around and it would be kind of the same thing. Now I knew it wouldn't be like, I wouldn't be able to hit jumps or rails with this thing, and to be honest, I don't really do that stuff anymore. Now that I'm old, I kind of just stick to the back trails and just kind of go through the woods, cruising along, and I thought this would be where this bad boy would shine. So right after that intro, it was dark outside, it was still snowing, we'd probably gotten maybe 5 inches of snow at that point, nothing had been plowed, but waiting till tomorrow to try this out was just not in the tables. I had to try it, so I went out to my garage, I strapped in, and I took off down the driveway, and at first, it was pretty sick. At first. Let me start by painting a picture of like my area so you can understand how I initially thought I was having a great time. But my house sits above the road, so my driveway is downhill to the road, and then my house in the subdivision is the highest point of the subdivision, so no matter if you turn right or left, either way you're going downhill. So when I took off downhill out of my driveway and turned left onto the road, I was cooking along pretty good. Now I was staying inside of the ruts of cars that have driven down the road before. I did notice quite quickly that if I steered out of the ruts and out of the hard packed snow, this thing struggled. And by struggled, I mean it just didn't work. Like this thing cannot get traction on anything other than hard packed snow. Hard packed snow. So I stayed in the ruts and I moved downhill, ripping along pretty good, feeling pretty good, until I got to the lowlands of my subdivision. At that point, we ran into issues. I went around the loop, I started heading back uphill towards my house, and real quickly, I found out how well this puts down power, and it is as close to zero as you can get. Any bit of soft snow, especially uphill, you are just gonna spin the wheel. It is not putting down the traction. Now, I did stay in the ruts, like I said, of the cars that drove up and down the road before I got out there, and was shifting my body weight and kind of helping it along. I could move uphill towards my house. I'm talking like walking speed. Maybe if I got lucky and had to hit a real hard patch, I could get up to a light jog, but it was a real struggle to get back up to my house, and I eventually did make it. But to say I was deflated is putting it lightly. And keep in mind, this thing says it is rated for up to a 20% grade, and nowhere in my neighborhood is there anything close to a 20% grade. The steepest part of the whole route that I took was my driveway. Like my driveway is like 30 feet long. It rises probably 3.5 feet, so it's like a 10% grade. Bruh. And this thing just barely could do it. I'm talking like slower than you could walk. It was just inching its way up the driveway with me on top of it, helping it along, and that was if I got lucky and it just didn't start spinning or just stalled out the wheel, period. So the first night was not a good one. Hello darkness, my old friend. But I wasn't ready to give up. I figured, it was still cold outside. The winter storm had just moved through. The temperatures were like low single digits, talking 3 degrees overnight, 3 degrees Fahrenheit. I figured that after the snow had time to settle and kind of compact and it was cold, it would get nice and hard. This thing would have a much better shot of being successful. So the next morning I got up, I went over to a local school where they had like a parking lot. I figured maybe they plowed it and it would be like the hardest of packed snow that this thing would just be awesome on. And when I got over there, they hadn't plowed it, but I figured it's only like 4 or 5 inches deep. There's asphalt underneath it. It's flat. What's the problem? And I mean, I had a better time. I will say that. I was able to move back and forth slowly. It wasn't super fast. I was able to turn a little bit. But if I went out in the grass at any point, big failure, couldn't move at all. Or if I just didn't have my weight positioned properly, wheel spin, big failure. So I just put it back in the truck and went home. Now, luckily for me, the temperatures did stay low. They're pretty cold still, single digits for the remainder of the week. And they did eventually plow. Now, in my subdivision, where I'm at, they don't salt this side of the subdivision. They salt on the side that belongs to the city, but not where I'm at. So the roads, they get plowed, but eventually they just get smashed and smashed and smashed until it's like a thin veneer of white paint, which is basically ice and snow. And I was like, that's gotta, this is its one chance of redemption. Let's try it one more time before we just throw in the towel. And with this setup, I did have a much better experience. I was able to head, obviously, downhill all the way down to where I got to before with no issue. But when I got to the bottom of my subdivision, the lowlands, you could say, and I was able to go uphill. The areas that gave me trouble that night it was snowing weren't really too bad for me. I was able to go up the hill. I was able to maneuver, ride around pretty successfully. I got nowhere near the advertised max speed of 50 kph or like 31 miles an hour. The most I've seen on flat level roadway that was covered in snow was 17, and that's on the controller. They have a little built-in speedometer that I assume measures wheel speed and it gives you an idea how fast you're going. Most I ever saw on flat ground was 17. Now going downhill, I'm more than likely able to hit 31 miles an hour, but that's mostly due to my weight and, you know, gravity. But let's talk about that weight thing. Let's be honest. You're looking at me right now on the screen. I bet the first word that comes to your mind when you look at me is not skinny. I'm a bit of a fatty. Now in the manual, this guy right here, it states the max load of this board is 200 pounds. But on the very first page in the warning section, it has a statement that says do not exceed 220. Now on a good day, like I'm talking good day, just got out of bed, before I get in the shower, butt naked on a scale, I'm 219.2. I'm one sandwich away from being over the warning maximum do not exceed weight of this board. And by the time I put on my gloves, my hat, my coat, my pants, everything, boots, backpack carrying this 5-pound battery around, I got on the scale just to see where I was, and I was just shy of 255. That's 35 pounds over what this board states in the warning section to never exceed. Now, to this thing's credit, it was able to push my fat body around at 17 miles an hour, but it's still not comfortable for me. I mean, how that warning section, the do not exceed, is in this thing for a reason. They don't want you to overload this motor or the speed controller or something. And although it worked good for me, how long is it going to work for me? I think that my weight plus this board is just a function of time before I let the magic blue smoke out of this here motor or this here speed controller. Now, nothing bad for me did happen when in the short time I rode it, but it probably would over enough time. Another thing I want to touch on is controllability of this thing. It does phenomenal in a straight line. The wheel is well aligned to the board. It doesn't want to drift or step out one way or the other. When you're going straight, it's pretty locked in. It feels like you're on rails. Turning it, a bit tougher than what I'm used to from regular snowboarding. I think if you snowboarded a lot in the past or just have snowboarded at all in the past and know how to control the snowboard, when you get on this thing, it's not going to be exactly the same. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but it is doable. Now, as you go slower and slower, turning gets harder and harder. The biggest issue I had was just like standing still or turning when you go really slow. For me, as somebody that's snowboarded a lot, especially in my younger years, I have like this built-in muscle memory that if I'm standing still or moving slow and I'm bound into the board and I start to lose my balance a little bit, you know, you just give a quick hop, you get your feet back underneath you, and you can re-situate yourself and get your balance back. And that is like ingrained in my head. So when I'm standing still on the sidewalk with this thing and I start to tip over, I instinctively just try to jump and get myself realigned. And this bad boy weighs 33 pounds. So that just doesn't work. Also, all the weight is back here. The most of the mass of the board is over the tail. And if you try to jump to reorient yourself, the front end flies up, the back end does not, and you just fall over. That was pretty much the only time I fell using this thing, was just trying to reprogram my brain not to just jump randomly as I'm starting to tip over, because it just makes the problem worse. But you know, with enough time, you can kind of reteach yourself how to function on this snowboard. But regardless of your skill level, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. But you know, I don't want to just shit all over this thing. It's a new product. It's cool that it exists. The board seems well made. I haven't bought a snowboard in a long time, so I don't really know what good is nowadays. But you know, it seems good. The whole structure of the wheel and the motor All seems pretty rigid. There's very little plastic on this thing at all. Pretty much all the structural components are made out of what it looks like aluminum. The remote feels good in the hand. The throttle is responsive. It's crisp. The brake works well. The only thing on this, though, that I would change is it has this P and S button. So you can enter the menu or power it on and off with these P buttons and S buttons. And I noticed that when I hold this thing, my thumb naturally wants to fall where the S button is. And when you're out there riding around, you'd have a tendency to grip this stronger than you probably should. And I ran into the problem where I would either hold down the P button and shut the remote off, and then it would just stop working and I would be confused. Or another issue I ran into was to hold down the S button, and then not knowing that I navigated to the calibration page for the motor, I was trying to get it to move, and I ended up reversing the motor, and I couldn't get it to function right, and I was very confused. I had to reach out to Cyrusher to figure out what exactly I did. They told me how to correct it. I just had to recalibrate it. But in the future, these buttons need to be moved out of the way of your thumb because they cause problems. Now, once you're aware that your thumb has a tendency to push these buttons without you wanting to, especially with gloves on, you can kind of reposition your hand to not do that, but it's still an issue. You know, it all comes back to the correct environment. In the correct environment, which is hard-packed snow, and you're probably thinking hard-packed snow like something you'd see on a groomed trail. Harder packed snow. I'm talking concrete on the road, been smashed by a roller for 6 days, and it is like a solid sheet of ice. Works great. Now, like I said, it does track good in a straight line, but you gotta be careful, like heading uphill when you're putting power into the wheel and you're trying to really keep yourself moving. If you hit a patch of ice like I did, the wheel will spin and it will try to wash out on you, which is, you know, kind of be expected. It's kind of like drifting a car, but that is the one thing I did notice about driving it. It's pretty easy to regain control. You just kind of use the brake or reduce the throttle and it kind of straightens itself back out. But that is something I noticed. But the suitable terrain is the key factor for this thing. Hardest to pack snow. And it's not like Cyrusher doesn't know that. They put that in the manual, that this thing is not good in loosely packed snow or powder. It's made for hard packed snow. I can't stress that enough if you're thinking about buying this. They even go as far as to say, and I will read it verbatim from the manual because I think it's pretty sus if I do say so myself. Are you ready for this? Due to the road conditions of powdered snow and deep snow, which may cause the wheel to sink and spin freely, this electric snowboard is not suitable for riding in powdered snow and deep snow conditions. Please be informed and understand that we do not accept refund requests based on this reason, as the production and long-distance transportation of a large item involves significant cost and time-consuming efforts. Yeah, I don't like that at all. If you're like me, this could easily have gotten me. If you saw this thing pop up on a YouTube ad, or you just happen to find yourself on their website and you notice this snowboard with this sweet looking wheel on the back of it, and saw some of their promotional videos, you're like, that looks sick. I want to give it a shot. And you didn't even go down to the very bottom of their website and see that it says hard packed only. Maybe you didn't even, maybe like me, you're like, hard packed, that's like a groomed trail. We're good. You could buy this, and then when you figure out it doesn't work like you thought it was going to, ask for a refund, and they would just tell you to pound sand. And that's a $2,500 pill you got to swallow, because that's another issue, is that this thing's $2,500. Now, I don't doubt that is somewhere close to what it costs them to produce this, plus a little margin. Like, a good snowboard is probably what, $600,000. You got this speed controller, this motor, this big old battery. Everything looks like machined aluminum. I mean, you add a little margin on top of that, and you're probably somewhere close to $2,500. Now, as a customer, do I think this thing is worth $2,500 based on its, capabilities? No, I don't think so. So after using the Cyrusher Ripple for this past week, trying to have a good time, do I think you should go out and buy it? Well, on the surface, nah, you shouldn't. I mean, if you are familiar with snowboarding, you like snowboarding, and you think this is going to be a product you can just rip around your neighborhood and be like the same thing as snowboarding, not going to do it. Now, if you have $2,500 and that's not a lot of money to you, and you just want something to play around with, and you understand the issues that it has in anything other than basically frozen concrete, yeah, you can pick one up and play around with it and maybe tweak it and see if you can make it better. But for the average consumer like myself, like, would I buy this? One, no, because That's $2,500 for basically a winter longboard. And two, I'm too fat for it. Like, this thing is rated for a 220, never to exceed weight limit. And then like I said, by the time you put all your gear on, even if you're like 190 to 200 and you're underneath that 200 max load, by the time you get all your stuff on, get a little wet from the snow, you're gonna be over it. And yeah, it can move you along, it moved me along, but like I said, that's in the manual for a reason. How long is it gonna last with that extra strain on all the components? I wouldn't want to take that gamble for 2,500 bucks. So after it's all said and done, I think we're getting there. I think there's improvements to be made. I think they gotta ditch the wheel. They have to find a way to put a track on this thing. There's a reason snowmobiles don't have wheels. If you want this thing to work properly in the snow and not just on frozen concrete, the wheels gotta go. You gotta make a track somehow. I would up the power of the motor so fatties like myself or just slightly heavier people with gear on can ride it enjoyably at moderate speeds. But yeah, the wheel's the biggest downfall of it. And you got to find a way. Like, I understand early in the production cycle, not a lot of units have been made. You're ramping up production. Maybe this is a test thing. I haven't seen anything else like this on the market. It's going to be pricier for those people that have that money to burn. But for the normies like myself, if you're trying to get us to purchase this, it's got to get better. It's got to get cheaper. But I hope it does. And if you want one, for some reason, I'll put a link. Till next time.